Hi, this is John with VintageJBL.com, and this video is a restoration of the JBL L100 made in 1973. Customer brought me his set that were heavily damaged. Scratches on the sides, tops, bottoms, huge gouges. The corners had chunks just missing, so I had my work cut out for me on these. The video starts out with me putting the veneer on because on these corners I probably didn't hit record. I fixed them with Bondo. I built it up, sanded down each layer. As you can see there, it's already done and ready for veneer. This is a peel and stick veneer made by 3M. Pretty easy to use. It's applied by putting pressure down, and as long as you put the proper pressure down, it sticks, it doesn't come up. I use a homemade veneer scraper here, and I do all the edges. I do the middle outward, and then I go and do the edges. And then there's a couple other methods I use, you'll see in a video. One, I use an iron after I sand each edge, and then I go back with that veneer scraper. So right now I'm going to route the edges, and it's just the sides and the back. The front I put on even, so I don't have to do any cutting there. This is a climb cut where I go the opposite way with the router, and that is just to get the fuzzies and any glue that made its way out of those edges. And it makes it a little easier to see what I've done before sanding. So I sand each edge before I apply the next piece of veneer. So what I usually do, well, what I always do now is I put the sides on first. Then I work on the top and the bottom. So this way I have a uniform seam on the right and left sides of the top and bottom. This is what I mentioned before with the iron. I take it and just iron down those edges. It heats the glue up a little bit to make sure that it is definitely sticking on those edges. And then I take my veneer scraper and put a little pressure on it to make sure that there's no open seams or anything's coming apart. So what you see here is that waterfall effect where the grain is matching on all sides. And that's the benefit of starting that fresh clean edge on the front. So that's always going to be even, so when you put each piece on, you're going to have the grain patterns match. So this is the bottom piece of veneer. It's the last piece I have to do on the cabinet. And I'm just going to sand the edges and get it ready for painting. This is part of the prep process for the front baffle and the back baffle. So what I do is sand it down. I believe it's 180. And I'll check to see if there's anything to fill, any dents or imperfections in the front. I try to get it as smooth as possible. After sanding the face, I take a piece of sandpaper and I just run over the edges to smooth them out and round them over a tad. This is an easy to sand filler I use. It is heavy duty. I think it's made of vinyl, and I use that to close up the edges where the veneer meets the fronts and the backs, and it makes a smoother transition when I paint and actually makes it seamless. Now I switch it up to 320 grit sandpaper so I can sand down those edges I just filled. Now that it's cleaned off, I'm going to mask the edges, and I'm using a blue painter's tape that prevents paint from getting past the edges. So I think it's called Edge Guard. And what I do is I put it almost to the top, but not quite, because I do want a little overspray to get on the sides and the top, so I can sand that off later, because it leaves a much cleaner edge in the transition from the black to the walnut. This is a primer I'm using, and it comes in a spray can in black, and it's the only way to get primer in black. So instead of using my HVLP and compressor, I'm just going to spray it on with this. This works really good, made by Rust-Oleum, and usually a can will get me maybe two sets of speakers done. And off camera, I'm going to be putting a second and third coat on. I just use the black primer as the undercoat, and I spray a clear matte finish over it, which is coming up next. And it doesn't matter. It's a waste of time to paint it, with black paint. And as you can see there, I'm spraying that clear on, and that is about 3 coats of the black primer. This is the final stage before applying the linseed oil on the walnut. I'm sanding it down to make sure it's all even, and I'm using 280 grit. And after I use the orbital sander, I'm going to grab a folded up piece of sandpaper and just go up and down just to get any swirl marks out. I use boiled linseed oil bought from Home Depot to apply on the cabinets, and I put about 3 or 4 coats on. It's good enough. There's formulas online that have all kinds of concoctions, and I've tried some of those, and I just found that This is the best way to do it. It goes on easy. There's very little to wipe off at the end. You do have to give it a good wipe after each side. Each coat of linseed oil you put on will build up the sheen a tiny bit, but it'll be mostly matte when it's dry. And I'm convinced that when JBL did their speakers back in the 70s, they stained this walnut because there's no way it's that red unless they were using shellac. And I know shellac turns red over time, but the way the grain pops on these speakers with just the clear on it is beautiful. And I've never seen a pair of old JBL speakers that look like this. I want to thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. And if you need any restoration work on your speakers, or if you need speaker stands or cabinets, contact me on my website, vintagejbl.com, and I'll get back to you with a quote as soon as possible. If you live out of state, you could always ship it to me. Again, I thank you, and please like and subscribe.